Gur margat Malcolm agus dús bhám bhuichas críúil a chur anúil duna Harry Dara O'Brien, Malcolm Noonan agus Pippa Hackett a socht an cuireadh uig a utha chúm a bheith in bhór domhta chun ábhar rítheachtaach seo a phlé. Agus ar a sibse tá sa hala seo inmh, agus iad sonatá ag ghlacha páirt go fiorúil, tá pobal file bailithe le chéile, pobal eisceach túil atá ag treabhail le bliain in dhéag bliana ar leasa an dón nádúra atá thart orring. Sibse a dehan le blianta fada an buil ina bhuilimar, mada leis an slád a bhí agus is othlum rá atá fós á dhéanamh ar dúlra na crinne. Cé go bhfuil dúchláin mór róing a gcónaí, mollam sibh a socht an obair sin atá déanta agaibh agus atá fós á dhéanamh agaibh ar our son. And thank you all and good morning to everyone. And first of all, I want to pay tribute to those behind that cinematography and that beautiful film in capturing some beautiful images of nature and the various aspects of it. One of my favourites being the bluebells, which always to me is a sign of time of the year when hope springs anew. But I'm thrilled to have been invited and to be with you this morning to deliver this address at Ireland's second National Biodiversity Conference, a conference I know that will lead to the development of the action plan. I know that you had an inspiring and productive day yesterday. You heard from Elizabeth Maromar-Emrad, the Executive Secretary of the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, and Stefan Leiner, the Head of the Biodiversity Unit at the European Commission's Directorate General for Environment, as well as my colleagues, Minister O'Brien, Noonan, and Minister Hackett, and a wide range of national experts and leaders on biodiversity. I hope today is every bit as productive, and from a personal perspective, I'm very glad to have the opportunity to share some thoughts on biodiversity and express my support for your work and for your deliberations, which I believe are vitally important to the future of our country, and also to commit, as Taoiseach and as Leader of Government, to really work on the delivery of the action plan and the delivery of clear results and outputs from our endeavour. And that's where I see a key part of my work and the wider work of government in terms of this agenda. And as I just said in Irish, those who are gathered here in this hall and those attending virtually are part of an exceptional community. Through your professions, your academic research, your voluntary organisations, or your position in the public service, you have acquired a deep understanding of the relationship between our human endeavours and the natural world around us. Many of you have worked tirelessly to convince those of us in the political and policy spheres of the dangers to us as humans and to our way of life of our continued destruction of nature. It is fair to say that your message has not always been heeded. It is probably also fair to say that it has still not been adequately incorporated into our decision-making across so many spheres of activity, both globally and closer to home. But I do sense a deepening acceptance, a growing realisation that our fortunes are, as a species and a society, are inseparable from the fortunes of the natural world of which we are a part. The value of nature has become increasingly apparent to us all throughout the pandemic. For myself, nature is a constant source of wonder and solace, and something that brings me great joy. Whether walking in Courtmacsherry or on one of my visits to the old oak woodland in Woodpoint, there is something inside that resonates deeply with these natural surroundings and a feeling of well-being that cannot be replicated in other settings. When I launched the All-Ireland Climate and Biodiversity Research Network last November, I recall the landmark 2019 Global Assessment on Biodiversity Loss. Echoing strongly the themes of this conference, it stated that nature is essential for human existence and good quality of life. Most of nature's contributions to people are not fully replaceable, and some are irreplaceable. The great mistake of our species is to think that we are somehow separate from nature, that we can continually hollow out natural systems without consequence for our own well-being. Nature provides the essentials for human life, and it must be treated with the respect that it deserves. You all know the statistics on biodiversity loss. You know what the science says. Many of you have been involved for many years in communicating it to people like me. The message is being heard, and the consequences of biodiversity loss are more clearly understood. We also understand that successfully addressing the reality of biodiversity loss is very challenging. That assessment won't surprise anyone here in this room today, and this is the case for a few reasons. Firstly, nature underpins so much that is fundamental to our existence. Clean water, food, a stable climate all depend on functioning natural systems. As a species, we allowed ourselves to forget that truth and to become undisturbed by a persistent deterioration of ecosystems, species, and habitats. Secondly, the many actions that contribute to biodiversity loss, the endless chipping away at the web of life, they rarely make the headlines. A couple of trees here, a wet corner of a field there, a small bit of a hedgerow over there. Slowly and almost imperceptibly, biodiversity, nature, wildlife, call it what you want, has been slowly squeezed out of our landscapes and indeed our seascapes. Which brings me to my third reason. Too often we forget that we all depend on nature for everything we have. What is good for nature is ultimately good for society and the economy. Sometimes we have lost sight of this. We didn't understand well enough the ecological consequences of our actions, or the social or economic prerogative did not take the value of nature into account. But we know better now, and our understanding is deeper. We must now, globally and at home, find a way to shape our activities to continue to provide the social and economic benefits that we must have while safeguarding the natural world on which we depend. As we mark the centenary of our state, we acknowledge the vital role of the vast peatlands, rich agricultural soils, and mighty rivers of Ireland have played in the development of our society and economy. As we look to the future, we do so in the knowledge that those same ecosystems are vital to the resilience of our society, climate, and economy over the next 100 years and the centuries to follow that. We must think long-term and not be afraid of changing how we do things to meet the challenges of our new reality. Ensuring that resilience demands a bold, ambitious, and integrated vision for the future of nature, water, and carbon. Biodiversity loss and climate change are deeply interconnected challenges. Climate change accelerates biodiversity loss, and biodiversity loss drives climate change. Furthermore, restoring biodiversity can help to reduce carbon losses from our land, sequester carbon emissions, and improve the climate resilience of our ecosystems. We need to find a way forward that will help us to adapt to a future with a changed climate, make space for nature to thrive, and empower a renewed economic and social vibrancy within our rural communities. The challenges ahead of us are substantial. The approaches that brought us to this point will not suffice. Some part of our human psychology will seek to wish away or deny what is so clearly happening around us, but that is no answer. Ní neart go chur le chéile. We must work together for all our sakes and find a truly sustainable path forward. Work is already underway to restore and rehabilitate our peatlands, consider and renew our approach to forestry, create a network of marine protected areas, and review the way we use our land. The government I lead is making good progress on these fronts, but there's a long path to travel yet. Today, you've all gathered here in Dublin Castle to discuss and shape our fourth National Biodiversity Action Plan, Ireland's keystone policy for the recovery and restoration of nature, which will help to guide us along that path. It has been coordinated by the National Parks and Wildlife Service, an ever-evolving organisation staffed by some 400 dedicated and passionate advocates for nature. The government recently approved the full implementation of the Strategic Action Plan to renew the NPWS and its transformation into an executive agency. This renewal is a significant milestone, but it's important that we are mindful that biodiversity action and protection goes far beyond the remit of the National Parks and Wildlife Service. And in the immediate time ahead, I will be meeting with the service to make sure we deliver now on this agenda, fairly timely and in an active way. Like climate change, biodiversity loss will only be successfully tackled as an all-of-government and all-of-society project, which will require the vigilance of planners, local authorities, agricultural advisors, and all manifestations of state who have a hand in regulating interventions in our land, rivers, lakes, seas, and air. As a society, we must not shy away from being more ambitious about protecting and restoring nature. All sectors have a role to play, and in that context, I'd like to recognise the crucial work of farmers, fishers, foresters, businesses, educators, young people, and community groups as agents of change in championing biodiversity and taking action to reverse its loss. We've seen how well we can work together in a crisis, whether public health, international security, or indeed on climate. Biodiversity is no different. In that regard, an all-island approach to addressing biodiversity loss is essential in Ireland. Together, we must develop integrated land and sea, urban and rural, north and south, east and west, biodiversity solutions that can be deployed in a fair and just manner and maximise co-benefits for people and the planet. Biodiversity does not recognise borders, and so the government, working with our partners in Northern Ireland, wants to work more strategically to address shared biodiversity challenges on this island. And indeed, we're open also to the east-west dimension and a tripartite approach to this particular issue. Last year, as part of the revised National Development Plan, we set new shared island investment objectives to support more all-island approaches to biodiversity protection and to conserve our cross-border region peatlands. Earlier this year, the National Economic and Social Council also published comprehensive research on shared island, shared opportunity, which identified a strong ambition and vision among stakeholders north and south to work more effectively on climate and biodiversity on a cross-border basis. We're now working to put that shared ambition into practice. This year, the government will bring forward a new shared island community climate action scheme to support cross-border and all-island partnerships, including to deliver nature-based interventions that enhance biodiversity and support climate resilience. And through our £1 billion Shared Island Fund, we are ready to make other strategic investments in pioneering biodiversity actions on a north-south basis and an all-island partnership basis. And I've been very involved in terms of obviously the Shared Island Initiative. Just to say, I'm impatient with the need for progress on this front. The funding is in place, and we hope the network and others on the cross-border area can come together to realise projects and to make this a reality, because all the instruments to enable this are now in place, and I think it represents a real opportunity, as we've demonstrated in the field of research, for example, where up to 40 million now has already been allocated to north-south third-level research collaborations funded entirely out of the Shared Island Fund. We want to do something similar, if not bigger, on this front on a cross-border basis, which is free of all the politics and all of the other stuff that can get in the way. And I'm not mentioning protocols or anything else like that. So there really is an opportunity here, I think, to move forward quickly and as effectively as we can. Indeed, many successful examples exist of society coming together to deliver real impact for rural communities and nature. The Burn programme led the way some 20 years ago by putting farmers at the centre of an innovative results-based payments scheme. And this pioneering initiative has since informed many others, including some that focused their efforts on species like the hen harrier, freshwater pearl mussel and corncrake, and others that focused on habitats like raised bogs, pristine rivers and blanket bogs. Results-based, community-level projects like these are the way forward for nature, and I'm glad to see them reflected in the cooperation project areas under Pillar 2 of Ireland's CAP strategic plan. I envisage even more ambition in the National Biodiversity Action Plan. These approaches can bring benefits for biodiversity as well as for the climate, and it's vital that we employ both lenses when identifying solutions. But there are fundamental differences between the two. With climate, you can set national targets and sectoral emission ceilings for metric tons of carbon. But nature isn't quite like that. We can't measure it in tons. The indicators are more complex. The action is at the level of the field, and that field is usually owned and worked by somebody. And this is why communities need to be at the heart of biodiversity action. And I'm hopeful that the Citizens' Assembly on biodiversity loss will give us much to consider in this regard. And I'm glad that the new National Biodiversity Action Plan will be able to respond to both the Citizens' Assembly on biodiversity loss and the forthcoming Young People's Assembly on biodiversity. Collaborative approaches are urgently needed at the global level too. The degradation of our natural environment is a major threat for the stability of societies and their peace and security worldwide. It is also aggravating poverty and inequalities, as well as hunger and malnutrition. In September 2020, at the United Nations Summit on Biodiversity, I signed the Leaders' Pledge for Nature, and in so doing committed to putting biodiversity, climate and the environment at the heart of national and international development and cooperation. 93 world leaders have also signed this pledge, which recognises that we need to appropriately value nature and the support it provides as we make decisions. It recognises that the business case for biodiversity is compelling. The benefits of restoring nature outweigh the costs tenfold, and the cost of inaction is even higher. According, nature and biodiversity underpin human life on Earth, and our lives are all the poorer for their loss. When we look to the future and contemplate the world we are leaving for our children and grandchildren, we know instinctively that a healthy, thriving, natural world is integral to their well-being and to their own future prospects. The rich tapestry of the natural world has been our inheritance. In many ways, we have fallen short in protecting it. But knowing what we know, we can resolve to change our approach and put the protection of nature and climate at the heart of our decision-making. As the filmmaker, activist, and late Senator Eamon de Buitléar said back in 1987, and I quote, "I will keep on chipping away with my hammer and chisel until the system begins to understand that we have a country which is nothing short of a jewel, and we do not really understand what we have and what we stand to lose," unquote. It's taken us too long, but I think that today we do understand what we have, and we have a very real sense of what we stand to lose. The time has come for a new era of stewardship of our natural world. We must follow the science and urgently turn things around for the good of all people and our planet. Building biodiversity awareness, knowledge, and action is key, and I commend your conference for its contribution to these ends. Most importantly, alongside the evident challenges, we must look to solutions, which I know you have been considering at length. We must not shy away from what needs to be done. Mulim Shiv, a socht an tugra hochtach atá fi vonagwef, a socht vor nigras son an dúlra, agus a socht vor nirachti vahas winter na herden, agus na glúnta atá le tacht in our niig. I thank you very much indeed for your work, and I wish you the very best in your deliberations today. But more crucially, I commit to following through on your recommendations and in making sure that this becomes the era when significant change was witnessed. Thank you.